2 days ago, the ESPN esports writer Fionn, Fionn, one of the best writers in esports, a guy who's phenomenally talented and gifted and has worked very hard to become one of the best at developing narratives and telling stories and being economical with the details of the stories so it doesn't get too bogged down with specific details you don't necessarily need, but understanding what those aspects are and therefore what to omit to keep a very fluid storyline that fits together and mirrors and resonates with certain archetypes. One of the esports' absolute best writers, and particularly in the field of League of Legends, a phenomenal content creator right now, released a piece 2 days ago which was about Faker, and it was about he did a piece in the past about Faker boxing with God, but this new piece was like an update for Faker's recent accomplishments. He's won the World Championship again, he's won another OGN, his 5th OGN title, well technically LCK now, and this piece, when you consider the status of Fionn, who, as all the things I described, those are well known to be the consensus about him, he's a phenomenal narrative writer, people love to read his best pieces, especially these sorts of historical pieces, and almost portraits of a guy's style and strengths and context of what makes him great. This is right up his alley. It's about the best player of all time in League of Legends, who right now has just accomplished something great. This sort of a piece, as someone who's been around the esports industry a long time, has a lot of experience with Reddit and a lot of experience with content creation, this should have been a surefire, slam dunk, 100% easy to predict top 5 on Reddit piece within like 40 minutes, within 50 minutes of being released. This should have been a piece that potentially gets to number 1 on League of Legends Reddit, and then even goes on to r/all, and people are coming in, oh, what's this, who's Faker, what's this about, oh, video games, professional video games, like that. Instead, after an hour, this piece hadn't even reached the front page already. It was 2 days ago, by the way, so there's no vote manipulation going to happen because of this video. Not only had it not reached the front page after an hour, it took several hours to get to the front page, and then it never got that high overall in the context of what I'm saying, which should have been the obvious projected result here. And the reason why that didn't happen is not because the piece wasn't good enough, because it didn't come out in terms of the topical aspects at the right time. It's not like people aren't interested in Faker at the moment, or people don't want to know about an update to his career and the context of it, or what Fionn has to think about it. It's not any of those factors which would normally be the things that would dictate the success of an article like this if you did everything else correct. So it's nothing on Fionn's part that's incorrect. The reason why this was fucked up is because of his editor. Now, this is speculation on my part. I haven't specifically asked Fionn to tell me, oh, did your editor do this or what? But when this sort of thing has happened in the past, in other instances with other great writers, who are fantastic writers in esports, in League of Legends and other games, I've checked with them when this sort of pattern happened and something was released clearly at the wrong time. I've asked them, and in pretty much every single case, it turned out an editor at these big websites, ESPN, The Score Esports, other websites, was the one responsible for choosing when the article was scheduled and when it went out. And the writer maybe had a little bit of input, but sometimes in these cases where it was fucked up, he didn't get the final say, and so they've just been at the whim and the mercy of one of these editors, and it's the editor that's put out at the bad time and thus fucked up the whole success of the article, the exposure of the article, and ultimately how many people will get to read that article. I guess that counts as the exposure, but you see what I'm meaning? For something which should have been very easy to succeed with. And it's not just the context of editors, it's at these big sites, which they're the editors coming in have either very loosely been in esports, or they're big traditional guys who come in from traditional sports and journalism, and they're thinking this is the way it's done. Now, the reason why this is so egregious, and I've done this video because of the Fionn example, even though I've heard of it happening with other great writers I respect, is because this is the worst and most egregious example I've seen of it. Because as I said, this is a slam dunk. It's not like there's any debate here. Like I said, I even said just top 5 is a slam dunk. I think it could have got to number 1. I think it could have been on r/all. I think it could have been one of the most successful pieces of Fionn's career. Instead, it wasn't particularly successful. It was almost like a throwaway piece, like his sort of weekly roundups of whatever leagues he writes about, LCK. It was almost like one of those, like a power ranking. In terms of the ultimate success it got to. It didn't get the thousands of points that it should have on Reddit. Now, the reason that's important is because this piece could have been Fionn's magnum opus. This could have been a piece which wasn't just a historical piece in terms of the content, like it's about a historical player, putting him in a historical context, but it could have been a historical piece in the context of the piece itself and where it fits into the history of esports journalism. This could have been one of those pieces where, let's say, Faker's career doesn't include more titles. Let's say his teams fall off, or he's very good still, but he can't win anymore, and he's stuck in like what happened in 2014. One day, people might 5 years from now, when someone says, "Oh, who are the best esports players of all time?" and someone says, "Well, we've got Flash and we've got Neo and of course we've got Faker," and someone goes, "Faker? Oh, I didn't really watch. I only watched like StarCraft and Counter Strike and Call of Duty. I never really watched League of Legends. How good was this Faker guy?" This is the sort of piece that people might link to and go, "Read about this man." It sums up some of the things that made him great and what was incredible and what made him stand out. And this is the guy you've got to know about. And so in that sense, this could have been Fionn's God of the Battlefield. And if in case you don't know, there's an article, God of the Battlefield, which was about the StarCraft Brood War player Savior, the fantastic Zerg player, who made 5 MSL finals, won 3 MSL titles and an OSL title, one of the all-time great players who changed the metagame. And this great article about that, called God of the Battlefield by Ver, is hailed as one of the consensus best pieces of all time. It's fantastic in this particular sense. And if anyone ever asks about a great StarCraft article or about Savior, you link them to this article. So you got to read this article. It does such a good job. This should have been that, or could have been that for Fionn. Instead, it's a very, very small flash in the pan, like a small appearance, and it hasn't had anywhere near the impact it should have and could have had otherwise. And primarily because of the editors at Fionn's website, ESPN. Again, speculation on my part, but in as much as I can't know directly, just take it as my expert opinion, as someone who knows about these things, that this is an editor fuck up, not Fionn. He would not make a mistake like this. So first and foremost, before we get into this topic, esports journalism is in a wonderful place right now, particularly financially. Also, it's wonderful in terms of how many jobs there are, how much exposure you can get, how even if you're a no-name writer, you can get stuff onto Reddit and it can have success before you get success in terms of financial success or writing for getting a good job. Then once you have the good job, this is a way to sustain it beyond people just going to a site and then clicking on your thing. There's new ways to get raiders in and to build your own fan base and to build your own site up, in fact. It's also, I would say, better than it's ever been, ultimately, when you consider all factors. I mean, the amount of work out there is phenomenal. The diversity of sites, it's not just 1 or 2 sites that you have to write for. There are tons of sites. And because of Reddit, you can write for small sites. And as long as they have the functionality and they can handle the hits, you can get as big hits as anyone. The kind of work that you can get paid for, you don't have to just do news posts and match fixtures like I had to do for many years of my career and do my long articles as a thing on the side that didn't even earn me money for fun. No, you can do that purely. You can do columns and long articles and interviews, and that can be solely what earns you money. And you can earn you a good living now. Also, the sheer amount you get paid per piece if you're a top-level writer or you've grooved up the wrong, or even low-level writers, just a lol esports guy who just started and did one piece, you can get paid an okay amount for this stuff. You can have it as a cool hobby, or you can develop it into a job if you're good enough. So ultimately, it's never been better than now. And part of the reason for that, yes, is credited to these big sites. ESPN, you've got the Score Esports, Daily Dot. Previously, we had On Gamers when me and Travis and Slash and all these people were there. Now we have Yahoo Esports, I guess, taking over from On Gamers to some degree from GameSpot. Now, the great thing about the big sites, first and foremost, is they mean you get really big money coming in. And especially, not just big money, but connected to full-time jobs / contracts. That's really good. Because even though for someone like me, I like freelance, some people, they don't want to work freelance. Like, if they're one of the biggest names or one of the best names, maybe one of these people wants to live in a world where they don't have to worry purely about the hits. They're not going to get judged on the hits. They're not going to get their money based on the hits. And they want a reliable, consistent, guaranteed salary for being as good as they are and doing consistent work and not having to worry about this piece they just did now, whether that gets there, because they know if they do enough pieces, they're going to get the hits. And that's what these people can get from these big sites. And that's wonderful. Likewise, most people, even really good writers, yeah, they spent a lot of time making the writing very good or developing their writing and their voice, but they haven't yet figured out how to brand themselves, how to market themselves, how to negotiate, how to do business. And so as a result, they haven't got a big enough brand on their own that they can necessarily have this success. So when a big site comes along, an ESPN or the Score Esports, by becoming a good writer and people knowing the credibility of those sites, they can attach themselves to that brand and they can grow with that brand. They can rise with the water level of that brand overall. That's a great thing, and develop their own voice and their own brand beyond that. As a result, they can benefit from that and provide great value to that brand, just as they themselves benefited from it. So the brand benefits, they benefit. This is a great scenario for most people. And you've seen this has happened to some of the people I respect a lot in terms of writers, some quality writers out there. Kelsey Moser, the Score Esports. Fionn, ESPN Esports. Emily Rand, to Score Esports. These are fantastic people. Obviously, Fionn was with the Score Esports previously before he went to ESPN. These are fantastic writers. I'm glad they have full-time jobs and they don't have to worry about all these things if they don't want to have the pressure of freelance in that sense. Now, it's worth saying that these people and how good they are also part of the reason, as I said, it benefits the brand, why these sites are so highly regarded. Yes, they'd have a big name. ESPN has a big name anyway. But if all the articles were just filler, or they were very, very light on the surface, or they only touched on topical things, there was never any of this depth, or even in pieces that are weekly roundups, very well written articles, well communicated, well articulated, well designed, interesting concepts, playing with new ideas, tying them into overall narratives. If all this stuff wasn't there, these sites wouldn't have the same credibility, the same impact on the scene, the same high quality, the same consistency to them. And so these big names in terms of writers, they mean something. It's not just the site's name which means something, which it certainly does, and they can contribute to that, but these big name writers are very important. And without these top quality writers and the top quality content they produce, those big names would not last in terms of being big names forever. Yeah, they'd be a big name in a context, but there's only so high they could get. They need to be buoyed up by the talent and the quality of the output of these writers, and it's a symbiotic relationship. Now, that's the best part of it. The worst part is now what I'm going to get to, which is the editors and the leadership of these sites. Because even the ones who actually claim to be from esports, they are nearly all, I would just say almost all, and I've got to know, or I've found out about many of them, almost all of them, the ones who say they came from esports, are people I have never heard of, and I have worked in, around, and behind the esports industry for 15 years in sites Russia, Sweden, Germany, USA, all around the world, been in many different scenes, been to Korea, been in North America, been to like 50 countries or something. I've never heard of any of these people, never interacted with any of them, never seen them do any sort of work that's notable, never even heard of them having a high position. So some of these people that even make the claim to come from esports, I'm very skeptical about that in itself. But the worst thing is, some of these people who, even the ones who come from esports and the ones who don't, all of them seem to have this one trend, which is what's fucking up esports journalism for me in terms of the big sites in this key area, which is that they all bring with them this mindset which would apply to traditional journalism, but not even from this decade. They bring this traditional journalistic mindset, ethic, approach to how you do things that would actually be more in place in a newspaper office, a paper newspaper office, a physical product, not a digital one, from the 1990s than it does in a 21st century digital esports journalism virtual office, if you know what I mean, by the staff setup and the hierarchy. That's where they would be more suited and where the things that they're trying to apply would work and have some logic to them. Now, part of this might be that they come from mainstream journalism, which hasn't figured all these things out. That actually, I think esports journalism is ahead of mainstream journalism in some of these senses of how you broadcast on the digital medium and how you are able to build your brand and how you deliver to people and how you understand how Reddit works, etc. Likewise, I can understand that some of these people were taught by people who are professors and they've got degrees in journalism, but that's because that guy comes from that world of old school journalism, of news, of brick and mortar newspaper journalism in the 1990s and the 80s and the 70s and whatever else. So the problem is these people come in with this mindset that doesn't apply, and the things they start doing, they assign incredibly talented writers, some very incredibly good writers, but very specialist writers in certain areas. They'll assign those incredibly good writers the stories that they're going to write. Sometimes they won't let these guys decide, or they'll say to this guy, I'll give you these three options. You decide which of the three you're going to do. We're talking about phenomenally created people where in many cases they would think up a better idea than you, or they would go into the same area that you might have picked a topic from and they'd have made a much better choice or given themselves a fourth option that will be better than them all. You're not even taking on account what strengths they have and letting them inform it. You're making them have a choice or not have a choice in a particular area that's fucking it up. They will tell writers that are very good, but sometimes even the writers aren't good, that you can't do this topic, even though it's a topic you want and would be successful, because someone else is doing that topic. As if your piece, if you're a fantastic writer, and the other person who might be a very good writer, because you're writing on the same topic, somehow the pieces would almost be the same piece. It's almost implied as though they were. So it's like an identical product, and they're going to overlap so much that only one of you can do that piece. And so again, they're going to be the same thing, even though it makes no sense. I mean, two pieces on Fake are not the same. Now, think about this. If you have the kind of writers I've been listing so far, fantastic, very unique voices, very skilled, very tenured, very experienced in terms of the topics that they do, and they're advanced thinkers who've built up their own philosophy on the game and their own viewpoint and their own perspective that's very coherent, consistent, interesting, unique, well articulated. If you have these sorts of writers, their takes, even on the same topic or an overlapping topic, will be so drastically different that they will all have value to them. And not only will you not be picking just one, as though it was like, oh, these are all three identical articles, I'll just pick this one. You won't just be picking one. First of all, you'll pick the ones you like. Like if I like Emily Rand, but let's say I don't like Fionn stuff, then if you assign Fionn to write the article about, let's say in this scenario, we'll just say about cacao, and him and Emily Rand write them, well, let's say I like Emily Rand's writing more than Fionn's. Now I'm going to read the Emily Rand one, and I won't read the Fionn one. So what happens if you tell Henry Land she couldn't do it because you gave the article to Fionn because he wanted to write it? Well, now I'm just not going to read the articles. So actually, they're not competing in this sense. If you put them both up, I might read both and I might find them both fantastic because, like I say, the topic might overlap, but the actual content and the context of the article probably won't. There'll probably be very little overlap in that sense, and the perspective will be quite different because these are phenomenal thinkers, and that is their job, to develop thoughts, and then their skill set allows them to translate that and communicate that to us through the medium of writing. You have to understand what's going on here. You're not just filling pages in a fucking newspaper in 1990 and someone has to cover the cat that got taken out of a tree. That's not the world you're in right now. So, I mean, to give a real journalistic comparison, if Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris want to write an article about Islamic jihadism, you're not going to go, well, only one of you guys can cover that, you know. I mean, we don't want two articles. They're going to go different perspectives. What's funny is I purposely picked those two because they had similar views, but the way they explain themselves, the way you see the way their mind works and their perspective will be different. They'll take totally different tacks on how the topic's going to be actually displayed, and it'll be the same topic with similar paraphernalia, as it were, in terms of what they'll choose as ways to tell the story. There's also the fact that, think about it this way, if Thorin writes the top 10 players of all time, I did it. I wrote the top 20 League of Legends players of all time like a year ago. If Thorin writes the top 20 League of Legends players of all time, and Kelsey writes the top 20 League of Legends player of all time, according to her, and Fionn writes his top 20 League of Legends player of all time, and Monty writes his, odds are you're going to read 2 or 3 of these. Because they're going to have some of the same names. They're going to be the same concept. They're going to be so drastically different that actually the only thing they'll share is there's a few names and the concept of 1 to 20. Like, Monty's will be totally differently described to Fionn's, for example. I know some of the players that will be radically different on theirs, and the way they think about the game is radically different. Another thing they'll do, they will schedule, and this is one of my problems here, hard-hitting pieces, heavy hitters. Like ones like this that are like all-time great, key moments in a guy's career that's a surefire, and this is like his magnum opus, his best piece that should light up the whole world. They'll schedule a piece like that and not let the writer choose what time it is. Again, he might be able to give input, but ultimately the editor chooses. And so if they choose the wrong time and they don't know what the fuck they're doing, then it's over for the writer. He's at their mercy. He gets paid his salary. He should shut the fuck up. He should just sit back down, and the editor knows better than him, and the editor's going to release it. And by the way, take the credit if it has success then. So, okay. Some writers, again, just like I said, some writers can't build their brand, even though they're fantastic writers. I'll acknowledge, some writers are not that good at knowing when to release articles. Maybe they haven't spent as much time as I have. They haven't tried to study the same patterns. They haven't tried to think topically which context of topics work at different times for different fan bases who are going to be around different instances, and which sorts of people might like to read it and will read it at certain times, because you can put the odd piece out at a weird time, but you have to know specifically why you're doing it and have a history. And you wouldn't experiment with a big heavy hitter. You'd experiment with smaller stuff and then figure out what the niche is and then make sure the heavy hitter goes out at the best possible time. Because it's not just that these are all writers who don't understand this concept. Some of these guys certainly don't understand this concept. That's how they got in these positions to get these amazing jobs. Rather, in some of these cases, the reason I know that the editor's done it is not just because I've double-checked in past cases, not this particular one, but because some of these examples, like this one, are so fucking utterly criminal in how badly scheduled they were, and then the resulting lack of success, that it's obvious that this is an editor scheduling it, and again, he doesn't understand the medium and who he's working with, and even how Reddit works, essentially. So this Faker piece by ESPN, as I said, should have been a surefire top 10, but you know the reason why it should have been a surefire top 5, and possibly number 1, is because if it had been released 3 to 6 hours earlier, it would have had the window where that almost certainly would have happened. I will put like a 99% chance, if not close to 100, like 99.999 recurring, that 3 to 6 hours earlier it'd be released, it would have hit that in that window. What's interesting is I went back on ESPN, I looked at what they released around that sort of window. They did release a piece. It wasn't Fionn's, it was a Dota 2 piece about a team, Wings, who aren't even tier 1. Now, this is a much more throwaway piece. This is from a different game. This is from a game that doesn't have overlap to League of Legends. And this is a totally different topic. And there is no reason in the modern era, especially since they're not going on the same subreddit, that these two pieces can't even be released alongside each other. I mean, even on Twitter, when you're going to see 2 tweets one after the other, well, if you don't care about Dota 2, you're going to ignore that one. You're going to look at the League of Legends one. You're not going to go, oh, well, 2 tweets. I only look at the top one. I ignore the one. But no, this again, you don't know on any level how this works. Reddit, releasing articles, Twitter. differences between the games. It's like almost this person just heard, we've got 2 articles. Well, I wouldn't want 2 articles going at the same time. People can only read 1 article at a time, can't they? Well, but one after another, but I put enough time away. Oh, how long do you think it'll take to read this? 1 or 2 hours, have a break. Yep, 3 or 6. Yep, that's about right. That's in a good window. This is so illogical the way this was done. So, it's not even the same game, Dota 2. It's not the same writer. It's not in any way relevant. There's no overlap. They don't understand the way the industry works. There's not a TV channel with linear programming of one thing that follows another and you can only watch one thing at a time. The pieces were not competing. They will get their traffic externally largely. It's not even like because they're on the website, oh, we don't want both things to have the front page spot. That's less relevant in this particular case. Also, the pieces have no connection. So it's not even an either or situation. It might be a both and, or it might be you read that or that, and it was never that you could have done both. So it might be both and or none. So it doesn't even apply in that sense. Now, what's funny is the reason why this whole scenario exists. I tried to be fair there and say, well, they come from a background where it's very different. And all this. That shouldn't be the problem, though, because they should come into this field and use their skills. Like they might be very good at managing, or they might understand how to proofread, or they might understand how to get the best out of a writer and help them develop. They might understand all these things, but they don't understand these aspects of the medium. So the way it could be fine is they come in and they go, right, I understand all these things from outside of esports journalism. But you know what? You guys have worked in esports journalism for years. Let me know how it works. Get me up to speed. What do we do? How do we release it in these times? Let me get all your opinions and then collate them and let me test what's going on here and I'll become better. No, what happens is these people come in and they think they're going to fix things. They're going to show us, esports journalists, how real journalism is done. But you know what? It's actually them who don't know how esports journalism is done. They might know how traditional journalism is done, but real esports journalism, you don't know how it's done. We know how it's done. And what's more, you're bringing in aspects from traditional journalism that make no sense in this realm, in this world. You have sick writers who are bringing traffic to these sites, not you editors. You might be doing a good job, you might be facilitating them, might be doing all that shit. But in the end of the day, in this particular instance, you're doing all that and then you're hindering the success. The most important part, in terms of the financial aspect of your site, the success of the actual article. So here's the thing. You need to learn before you start teaching. You need to listen before you open your mouth to speak. You need to accept this is not your world. Your rules don't apply. Learn what this world's like. Learn what the rules are. Then, yes, bring in some other things if you want and experiment and discuss and have a dialogue of interest. They haven't done that, though. And so in this very particular sense, on a number of occasions with Kelsey's pieces, with Fionn's pieces, I've seen great pieces of work. And in this particular case, what should be one of the all-time great pieces, fucked up by editors who might have the intention that they're trying to do the best for them, but they're not, because they haven't actually been humble to take away their pride and to learn about the field they're in. So it's actually incredibly haughty, incredibly arrogant the way they're behaving, and they're fucking up the careers of some fantastic journalists who've written fantastic pieces. Now, if you'd like to read Fionn's piece, this very, very well written piece, one of his best in his career about Faker, it'll be in the description box below. That's how you do it.